Welcome to the last Conversations on Online Teaching of the semester. Thank you so much for coming. Boy, if you're like me, it's a crawl at the end. As we get to the end, the final class, I have mine tomorrow. I'm trying to think of, what are the final words to sum up a whole semester's experience? And we all have to think about that before we head into our last class. So I'm glad you came, because I've been looking forward to this particular conversation all semester. Today, it gives me tremendous pleasure to welcome Charlie Nuttelman, Teaching Associate Professor of Chemical and Biological Engineering. So Charlie is a CU Boulder homegrown faculty member. He earned his BS, MS, and PhD here, and he became an instructor in 2007. Since then, he's won multiple teaching awards. And most recently, he's become a father. Logan was born on January 10th?
Yes, yeah.
January 10th.
Good memory. Yeah.
And
good.
strapping, right? Almost 8 pounds. Like,
yeah, yep, 715. Yep, big guy. Yep.
And he's in great health still?
He's in great health. He's not quite as big. He's tall, but only in the 11th percentile for body weight. He's 81st percentile for height. So he's lean and tall.
Lean and tall. Well, he can be a supermodel. Good for him. Good for you. Many congratulations.
Thank you.
So the reason I've been looking forward to this one is Charlie has taught 6 courses on Coursera, both that deal with Excel. The first is called Creative Problem Solving in Excel, I think. Charlie, you'll correct me. And the second is Everyday Excel. But the thing that stands out here is that Charlie has almost a perfect student ranking score. I looked this morning, I think the lowest number is 4.9. He is far and away the most popular CU Boulder teacher on Coursera with a true following. So I've watched Charlie's kind of meteoric soaring across the Coursera heavens, and I've asked myself a few times, like, what could this guy possibly do? Because he not only produces incredible courses, but he produces them quickly. So I am really interested in the next 45 minutes of discussion, and I kind of want to. I have an idea where I want to chase it, but let me just turn this over to Charlie so we can hear what makes a great Coursera course and how he repeatedly pulls his courses together. So with no further ado, Charlie Nuttelman, Screencasting Magic. Take it away.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, William. I don't think my accolades are quite what you put them to be, but let me share my screen here. Let's see if I can share my screen. I do have quite a bit of experience now with creating Coursera courses. And yes, they have been tremendously successful. Let me see if I can you guys all see my screen? Okay. They have been very successful. In fact, way more successful than I ever would have imagined when I first started putting together Coursera courses back in 2017. A lot of that success, I believe, comes because of my use of screencasts. And our department, Chemical Biological Engineering, we have a pretty long history of screencasts, and implementing those screencasts into my Coursera courses, I think, has made a huge difference. So I'll talk about that. My presentation is not entirely focused on Coursera courses. It's also focused on online modalities for in-person courses here at CU. So I have screencasts that I use before classes, so students prepare for those. I've taught a couple of online courses at CU with somewhat limited success, but yeah, a lot of them rely upon screencasting. And I guess the title of this, William came up with this title, which I guess is fine, is Screencasting Magic. And I think, William, you mentioned that I was a teaching associate professor. I'm now, just as a couple weeks ago, got promoted to teaching professor. So, I'm pretty excited and proud of that. I think the official documentation went through in the last couple days. So brief bio, I think William touched on most of this. I've been an instructor in chemical and biological engineering since 2007. I was an undergrad student here. I got my master's degree here. And then between masters, after I got my master's, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I actually took a year off and lived in Telluride, made snow, did some other things. And then I came back and got my PhD in 2005. And then I became an instructor in the department. Let's see. And I've taught 18 different courses. These are undergraduate courses for primarily chemical, biological engineering. I've taught a couple other courses in the general engineering department and some other miscellaneous courses. It wasn't until fairly recently, 2017, I think I was going on a road trip and I downloaded an audiobook, The End of College. And as you can imagine, for all of us in the college business, you don't want to hear that phrase. So I was kind of curious what this was all about. This book by Kevin Carey. I'm sure some of you have read or listened to this book, but that's where I really got interested in online teaching and the future of education here. So in the spring of, I think I started in the fall of 2017, I started putting together VBA. So Excel VBA. VBA is a programming language that goes along with Excel. And so I started putting together one course in the fall of 2017. And, I was thinking if I could have a couple thousand learners, then, that'd be pretty successful. That first course was very successful. I completed a second course and a 3-part specialization in the following spring. And there's tremendous interest in this. The interesting thing is most of the learners in this specialization, I kind of focus it on engineering, but more than 70%, 80% are business and finance majors, which is really interesting, which has kind of been a challenge for me to kind of adapt to business and finance. But nevertheless, a lot of those folks are interested in VBA. In the spring of 2021, I completed a 3-part Coursera specialization called Everyday Excel. So this is just Excel, not the programming language VBA. And this is this has actually become more popular than the Excel VBA. And I kind of focused this one on just teaching Excel to people who have never had Excel ever in their life. So in addition to a bunch of undergrad courses in person at CU, I've also taught a couple of online CU courses. And that has sort of allowed me to combine some of the things I've learned with in my Coursera career to online courses here at CU. In this time, I was going to try to count how many screencasts I've made in that time. It's probably 200 to 300 screencasts. And I'll show you in a moment what screencasts are, but I've created lots of these. So I certainly do not think that I'm an expert in screencasts. I think I have a long way to go before I can be super happy with my screencast, but I'm going to kind of share my experiences, give you some tips, how to make them, how to design your screencasts, and so on. All right. So I guess if people have questions, you can go ahead. I think there's somebody somebody just congratulated me. Thank you. But if you have a question, please feel free to chime in or on the chat. You can put a question in and I can pause to answer it. So I first wanted to kind of address how people learn and how teaching occurs. And how it has occurred in the past and where it's going. Just a brief slide on this. So the way people learn is changing. And I think most of us, we've been in education for anywhere from 10 to 50 years. I've been in the education business for, as far as learning and teaching, for over 25 years. So the way people learn is changing. In fact, so if you 20 years ago, so over 20 years ago, you wanted to learn something new. Let's say your garbage disposal goes out in your kitchen and you want to learn how to fix it. You don't want to hire a plumber to come in and do that. Where would you go? And I think a lot of us, we would maybe go to the library, the bookstore, or simply using the user manual that comes with the disposal. Or you might ask someone in person, you might hire someone, but if you wanted to do it yourself and learn, then you would seek out a book or a user manual. But today, when you want to learn something new, if you wanted to replace your garbage disposal today, you would probably, anybody know what would you do? If you wanted to learn, what's that?
YouTube.
Exactly, YouTube. Yeah, YouTube or Vimeo. These online sources where people can share in a free way. They can share educational sources. So many of these short educational videos could be classified as screencasts in nature, although a screencast, as I'm going to define it, as I'm going to work with, the definition is a short, pre-recorded, highly edited. I put that in parentheses because that's the screencasts that I create are unfortunately highly edited. And I think that's sort of the magic behind my screencasts in particular. They're highly edited. I put a lot of effort into them. And I think if you ask anybody who's made screencasts, the one disadvantage is they take a lot of time. So keep that in mind when you're creating screencasts. It takes a lot of time, and mine are highly edited. So they're educational videos. It's usually a video recording of your computer screen. In fact, that's the definition of a screencast. If you look it up, is a video recording of your computer screen. But you might also consider a screencast. It could be a video of an instructor as well, perhaps working on a light board. All right, so the way that people change, or the way that people learn is changing a lot, and that's because of this digital revolution. In fact, so I'll give you an example of a quick screencast. In fact, preparing for this presentation, I wanted to figure out how to format the background of just a single slide in PowerPoint. I'd never really done this before, and in fact, I don't really use a lot of backgrounds. So I went on YouTube and I searched for that. So you can pretty much find anything. So this is just one example of a quick screencast. It's to
only one slide. Let's pick a slide, go to design, and here are your themes.
So it's a recording, a video recording of your computer screen. So it's an educational video or screencast. All right. So this is kind of just an introduction to what a screencast is. I'll show you some of my screencasts, and then I'm going to give you some hints, some tips on how to make them good, I guess, and effective. Before I describe more about what a screencast is, I wanted to describe what a screencast is not. A screencast is not unedited raw lecture recording. When COVID happened, a lot of people were moving to online, and I think a lot of people just took previous lecture recordings, classroom capture, for example, and just kind of threw it online. And that's fine. That's fine to do in the short term, but I think as we're progressing towards real effective online courses, we really need to not be using lecture recordings. We need to be focusing more on shorter screencasts. So in my opinion, and I'm sure opinions differ on this, but online learning should not just be posted recorded lectures online. So 50-minute lectures, in other words. A screencast is actually, well, in my definition, is short. So it's got to be fairly short. It has to be interactive. This is really where I think that I have made, made screencasts effective is making them interactive. It shows steps, potentially includes animation and in-video questions and other interactive features. So just recording your screen while you show something, that's a screencast. But I think the way that you can make screencasts a lot more effective is to somehow interface or interact with the user. So if there's anything in this sentence that's the most important, it'd be making it interactive. And I think the main goal of a screencast is to replace normal lectures with short bite-sized chunks of learning that learners and students can watch, one, on their own time, so they can choose when they want to learn. And then the second is over and over. And my students are very diverse. Some of them pick up something the first time they watch a screencast or attend a lecture. But then there's other students that require repetition. They need to watch things over and over. So they watch it, and then maybe a week later, they watch it a couple times, and reviewing for the final exam, they watch it another couple times. So that's really, in my opinion, the goal of these screencasts. I just wanted to note that I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier, but chemical biological engineering, that's my home department. We have a pretty long history of screencasts. They've been around at least as early as 2008, if not earlier. I think I recorded my first screencast in maybe 2009 or 2010. There's John Faulkner, Dr. John Faulkner, retired professor. I think he's watching this presentation, but he kind of pioneered screencasts, at least in our department. He put together a lot of the material, started it off, as well as Dr. Janet DeGrazia, who was a retired teaching professor. And then Dr. Will Medlin, our department chair, has also been involved quite a bit with screencasts. Our department has a website called www.learncame.com. So if anybody's interested in learning more about screencasts, different types of screencasts, everybody has their own style. We have hundreds, if not thousands, of educational screencasts that you can view. Does anybody have any questions or comments at this point? I'd be happy to pause, take a sip of coffee. Oh, okay. I wanted to show you, I guess at this point, just a example of one of my screencasts. And there's nothing that special about my screencast, I think. I've refined them a lot, but there's all sorts of different styles for screencasts. So I'll show you one of mine, if I can figure out here. So this is one from Everyday Excel Part 1. This is a Coursera course. It's on removing duplicates. So in Excel, if you have duplicates, oftentimes you want to remove them. And so I'm just going to kind of play a couple minutes of this. I won't play the entire screencast, but I like to have a title slide. It's nothing fancy. Actually, mine are pretty basic, pretty boring, but they're all kind of consistent. I have the title, I have who's making that, and so on. And then, so let's go ahead and play this.
Whenever you are working with large data sets, you will inevitably have to search for duplicates and possibly remove duplicates. So in this screencast, I'm going to go over how you can identify duplicates and how you can remove them. So I've got this file called duplicates. I'm going to start with.
I'm going to pause it here because in a lot of my screencasts, I like to make it interactive, as I mentioned. One of the ways that you can make it interactive, you can't guarantee that learners are going to interact. But one way is to have these Excel files that are available to learners or students. So they can download this and they can kind of work along. Now, this is only if they want to. You can't really force them to do this, but it kind of gives them a way to interact if they would like.
Kind of an easy example here. I've just got a bunch of animals here, and we want to check to see if there are duplicates. If there are duplicates, we would like to remove them. If you just want to check to see if there are duplicates in a set of data, you can highlight that.
So let's just fast forward. I like to kind of use, you can zoom in, you can pan around. I like to use highlighting. Let me go here.
So let's just, I'm just going to cancel. Now I cannot use data, remove duplicates, because remove duplicates it searches through columns. I've got another example here.
Yeah,
Maybe we have orders by various people. We have.
Anyway, you have the content. I have highlighting. I like to zoom and pan, so it kind of keeps things exciting. And then at the end or within, a lot of times within, but at the end, let me scroll here to the very end. This is what makes it fairly interactive, is it pops up questions. Now, Coursera automatically allows you to add in questions. So you have these questions that pop up, and learners can take these quiz questions. So I think this is one way that we can really enhance the interactivity of screencasts. So that's just this would be a typical screencast in one of my Coursera courses. So that's the end product of what we're trying to make. Okay, let's get back to our presentation here. All right, so I'm going to now talk about how I make screencasts. And again, I've been doing this since maybe 2010, 2011. I've learned a lot. I've made a lot of mistakes. And so I'm going to kind of share my experiences. I personally make my screencasts in this software called Camtasia. There's the company called TechSmith that makes this software. I believe it's quite expensive. Our department has a license for it, I think for 5 or 10 people. But if you're interested in kind of testing it out, there's a free 30-day trial. You can go to techsmith.com. I would highly recommend investing in a high quality microphone. Audio over the years has given me the biggest problems. So you want a really nice microphone, and so definitely kick down the money for that. You want to do sound checks before each recording. There's nothing worse than pressing the record button, talking for 20 minutes. You've been practicing for a long time, and then you play it and the audio is not there. So these are just kind of some technical things. I kind of showed you a little bit of this. You want to add excitement by panning and zooming around. So Camtasia allows you to do that. You can edit this. I'll show you Camtasia here in a moment. But you can kind of pan around. You can zoom in, do all sorts of cool stuff. I've only scratched the surface on what's available in Camtasia. You can add focus. So bringing the attention to different aspects of your screen by using highlighting and text boxes. But bottom line, as I've mentioned before, quality screencasts require really a lot of time and energy, which is kind of the unfortunate thing about making super high quality screencasts. I think you can implement the 80-20 rule, and you can get most of the way there. So you can get 80% of the way there to a really high quality screencast by spending a lot less time on your screencast. So let me pop out of here. Let's go over to Camtasia. So this is what Camtasia looks like. And learning Camtasia is a whole, that would be a whole nother talk or talks. Yeah. There's a lot to learn Camtasia. I think the best thing to do is just, you can, as I mentioned earlier, you can pretty much find how to do anything on YouTube. So there's plenty of videos. I think our department actually on Learn Chemie has some of these, just basic how to use Camtasia, but you can pull in audio, you can cut and paste, you can bring in these annotations. So if I want to put maybe a little text box here, you can bring that in, and that's shown down here. So all sorts of stuff you can do. You can edit out stuff. And I spend a lot of time in Camtasia when I'm working on a screencast. And sometimes it's frustrating. So keep that in mind. If you want to really make high quality screencasts, I think you're going to have to count on spending a lot of time post-processing. So this is kind of what Camtasia looks like. You can go down your timeline. You can cut out segments of audio if you want. You can zoom in, zoom out. Really nice piece of software. So that's how I make screencasts. That's the technical, the software to do that. Now let me talk about how I use screencasts. I've mentioned this a little bit, but I've used screencasts well before online or remote learning was prevalent. So way before COVID, our department, we have a long history of using screencasts in our department. So again, 2010, 2011, somewhere along in there. It's great for STEM related courses, so science, technology, engineering, and math. I don't know how good screencasts would be for literature courses, for example, or language courses, but for showing things, particularly showing how to do things on a computer, my Coursera courses, that's all it's about, showing how to do things on a computer. It's great. So for in-person teaching, I like to use screencasts to introduce material before coming to class. Right now, in several of my courses, it's the primary way that students are introduced to new material. Sometimes I have reading assignments, textbooks and reading assignments. The compliance is not very high. You can assign chapters in a textbook, but I don't think in this day of age, not a lot of students are doing the reading. Unfortunately, textbooks, I believe, are probably the best way to learn. But I don't think our learners these days necessarily like reading textbooks, and that's unfortunate. But so students are introduced to new material using these screencasts. Class time is spent on answering questions and working through additional examples. So worked examples, and I think this is really valuable. A lot of times in class, I'll have handouts with problems, so with space, so they can actually work through. I think that's way better than the typical lecture. I also use screencasts in my in-person courses. If I want to give a hint on a homework assignment or a project, I record a quick screencast and post that on Canvas. And you don't have to edit everything. If this is just a short hint on a homework problem, then you don't need to edit that. A 2-minute screencast is not really, it's not worth doing that. And then sometimes I work through the homework and exam solutions and post these solutions as screencasts. So I find screencasts to be great for in-person teaching. Now, as far as online courses, their screencasts are actually even more useful. So my Coursera courses, occasionally I've taught an online course here at CU. Screencasts are essentially the only way that I teach new material. Again, I do assign reading assignments, but not all the time, but I find that screencasts are a really great way to introduce material the first time. Learners really appreciate the short time of these screencasts. In my screencasts, I try to aim for 4 to 9 minutes. Sometimes I'll go 2 minutes, just a short one, 3 minutes. Sometimes I'll unfortunately have a 10 or even 12-minute screencast, but the average, what I aim for is about 4 to 9 minutes. And I've had feedback from Coursera learners. They email me and say, hey, I really liked your screencast on X, whatever. Your screencasts are nice and short. On my subway ride to work, it's just the perfect amount of time for me to watch one of these. So I watch one on the way to work and one on the way back. So I think as we're looking at especially Coursera courses, you really have to take into account the people that are learning, the learners, and their background and their lifestyles, and a lot of them are professional, and so they can't sit there for 50 minutes and listen to a long lecture. I mean, they can certainly pause it and resume later, but I think it's really important to separate our content and isolate it down into small chunks of learning. Now let's talk about who benefits most from screencasts. And this kind of goes back to what I talked about towards the very beginning, and that is if you want to learn something new, like how to put in a garbage disposal. The people who benefit most from these types of this type of learning from screencasts is people who are searching for specific information. All right, so you need to learn how to do something because your life or your day depends upon this. All right, so that's kind of the motivation. Those searching for specific information. Online or Coursera learners, those are usually professional individuals with a lot higher motivation. So my Coursera learners, I don't need to motivate them because they're already internally motivated. And they are typically more motivated than the typical college student. And some of you may have similar experiences with your Coursera courses versus your in-person courses. Undergrads typically don't benefit as much from typical screencasts until they are motivated. So unless undergrad students are motivated, they're not really going to try to seek out information. And so I try to kind of flip the motivation around. I motivate them by homework problems, projects, exams, which obviously are linked to grades. And once you have a homework problem or a project or an exam that students care about, then they're going to pay attention to those screencasts. So a lot of my students, they watch the screencast because I require it. I actually make it part of their grade. But when I have exams and homework assignments, then I really see the view rate of those screencasts go way up because then they go and rewatch. And that's really where the learning value comes in. So you kind of flip it around and you make those undergrad students, they want to search for that specific information because their grades depend upon it. Now, I want to kind of talk about how I think I have enhanced the traditional screencast, and that is a traditional screencast, meaning just a pure recording of your screen. So just a recording and showing how something is done. I have, traditional screencasts are great at delivering content, but they're not very interactive. There's no accountability. There's no way to require viewing. So if I assigned, a couple of years ago, I would assign a screencast to my students and expect them to have learned that material before coming to class. And I'd find that they really weren't doing that. They weren't watching these required, quote unquote, required screencasts. So there's no real difference between asking them to watch a screencast and asking them to read a chapter in the book. There's not really any accountability unless you have some sort of reading quiz or quiz. So I've made a couple modifications to screencasts. I use in-video questions. I use this tool called Play Pause It. And if you're an instructor here at CU, you can, we have a campus-wide agreement with Play Pause It. So you can use Play Pause It. I'll show you an example of Play Pause It here in a moment. But you can put in video questions. Furthermore, you can link from Play Pause It, you can link the grades to Canvas. So it's really nice. You can have in video questions. You can change how the scoring works, and you can link those in video questions to Canvas. And so it counts as part of their course grade. And this is sort of the initial accountability of screencasts. So they have to watch it. Now, they don't have the motivation that I talked about in the previous slide yet until they have a homework assignment, a project, or an exam. But this causes them to watch the screencast, interact. They care about their grades. They're going to pay attention. They might rewatch sections of that screencast. And then they come to class and they're more prepared than before to work through additional examples and have better discussions. So, by the way, I showed you this. Coursera already has built-in tools to include in video questions. And it was actually, it wasn't until I was preparing my own Coursera courses that I realized I really liked how Coursera had the tools to include in-video questions. And so that kind of gave me the idea to put those in-video questions into my screencast for CU, and PlayPosit was just coming out. And so it was kind of a nice timing there. So let me show you what PlayPosit is. Oops. So PlayPosit. Has anybody used PlayPosit? Anybody?
Yeah, I used it in my class.
Okay, yeah, great. It's a great tool. It's awesome. So this is what it would look like for a student. I like to have these pauses. I always have a kind of an honor code statement there, but then they can press.
So now we're going to talk about something known as Bayes' theorem.
Hang on a second. I wanted to show you this.
So now we're going to talk about something known as.
Hang on.
So now we're going to.
I need
So
to.
now we're going to talk about something known as Bayes' theorem. Bayes.
Sorry, there's something that usually pops up. Let me refresh this because it's important. Okay, so I like to put a preview question here. And it's just kind of, it familiarizes the students with what they're going to be learning and what they're going to be able to do at the end of the screencast. So I don't know if they actually read this, but they can read through this example because I'm going to ask them later. I'm going to ask them this question. So that kind of primes them to pay attention to the rest of the screencast. So we've got our screencast, and I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I wanted to show you a couple things. I like to make it interactive, as I've mentioned. So here,
5 Vanagons
I talk about this, and then I have a question. So I go through this.
4 rabbit.
I'll just kind of scroll through here.
Based.
But you can place
The
these
first
in-video
question is,
questions.
If I select a car at random, what is the probability that is going to be blue?
All right, so a question pops up. Now this is nearly identical to what happens in Coursera, what you can do in Coursera. You can put in these questions, and I really like it because students and learners, they pay attention. And if they haven't been paying attention, at least in my CU classes, these count for their score, right? These questions, how they do. If they haven't been paying attention, then they're like, oh shoot, I got to go back and learn this. So they can scroll back here, they can scrub over here, and they watch it again. All right, so I'm turning a normal screencast where it's just viewing into accountability. It's part of their grade, and it's interactive. And a lot of students, I think, like the questions in there. So that's PlayPosit. Teaching PlayPosit would be another, or learning and teaching PlayPosit would be another, another half hour to an hour, but we don't have time for that. So let me go back to PowerPoint. All right, so elements of a captivating screencast. Let's talk more about what makes a quote unquote magical screencast. I think one of the most important things is to reduce information processing and cognitive load, the burden imposed on working memory in the form of information that must be held, plus the information that must be processed. So you really want to make things simple. As an example, if I said, memorize these 6 letters, B, T, Z, H, A, Q, all right? And then I said, now I want you to also memorize these 6 numbers, 9, 1, 3, 2, 1, 7. I doubt many of you could do that unless you wrote it down. So that's just a very simple example of cognitive overload. It's just too much coming in. And I think a lot of our slides that we present, our screencasts, in a certain amount of time, we're just presenting way too much stuff, and we're overloading the cognitive system. So I would recommend limiting extraneous images and text. Keep things really simple. Less is more. Fancy formatting is unnecessary and distracting. And if you notice my slides are probably the most basic that you can get. And I think I do that on purpose because I don't like to have distracting things. So let me skip forward here. Well, I'll talk about that here in a moment. So you want to keep things simple, fancy formatting, unnecessary. But you also, in your screencast, you want to kind of link your screencast from one to another. You want to integrate new knowledge with old knowledge. So in my screencast, a lot of times I'll say, remember what we learned in the last screencast, and I'll review it for 30 seconds. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take one step further. All right, so I like to relate new material to be learned with material that learners and students are already familiar with. So I'm going to go back to this formatting issue because I took this slide in PowerPoint, and you can apply some automatic designs. It'll always recommend some designs. And this is one. And so this slide and this slide are showing the exact same thing. But this slide, to me, maybe not to you, but to me, there's a lot more going on. And subconsciously, I think your brain struggles more with something like this than with something simple like this. So that's what I mean by fancy formatting. Same thing with this slide. You got this big graphic over here. So you're trying to figure out what that graphic is and all these colors. And here's another one. But I like to keep things super simple. And I think that's possibly what has made my screencasts quite successful. Who knows? It's just part of it. Now let's talk. I realize my presentation has gone longer than I wanted to, but let me just talk a few moments about preparing a screencast. So there's steps. You want to kind of plan. You want to plan out how your screencast is going to go. And what I like to do is I like to make one screencast for every learning outcome or objective. Each class period, I'll break down into learning objectives, and I'll talk about this here in a moment. But you want to kind of plan it out, and then you create all your visual, graphic, your support material. You might practice and rehearse, and obviously you're not going to do this for too long, but maybe, I don't know, 10 to 20 minutes, whatever. Just kind of go through to make sure that you know what's coming up, what you're going to do. Maybe you're gonna work through equations on the screen, whatever, and then you record, and possibly multiple times. And you really want to avoid recording multiple times because that really increases the time. Effective screencasts take time. And this is sort of what I estimate when I make a screencast, what I spend. So maybe 35% of the time is planning, putting together the graphics, the text, animations. 5% of the overall time is the actual recording. So very small amount of the time is spent on the recording, actually making the screencast or recording it. And then 60% of the time, I would say, is editing. And again, you don't have to do this. I would encourage all of you just to start simple. You don't have to add in video questions and do all sorts of fancy editing, but editing can take a lot of the time. For me, a 20-minute raw recording might only result in 6 to 8 minutes in the final screencast. So lots of editing in Camtasia. You should outline either on paper or electronically what you are trying to do. And what I like to do is something known as segmentation. And that is separating large learning goals or topics into smaller, manageable learning objectives. And I'll talk about that in the next slide. But you should think long-term. I would not devote the time in creating a screencast unless it's going to be around for a while. You're going to use it in your course for multiple terms, multiple course offerings, or you're going to hand it over. You're going to put it on a website like our department has, or you're going to allow other instructors to use your material. So you should be thinking long-term. Your screencasts should stand the test of time. Quality, invest appropriate time into your recording and editing. Take baby steps. Each time a course is taught, don't think you're going to make screencasts for every single topic. That'll just be overwhelming. Maybe each semester, each time you teach a course, you might only create 5 to 10 screencasts, and really focus at where they're necessary and most effective at the beginning. Segmentation. So I like to segment or separate the overall learning into, so you take large learning goals and topics into smaller, bite-sized, manageable learning objectives. And then I'll typically create one screencast per learning objective. And sometimes I'll create a worked example problem as a supplemental or an extra screencast. So I would say in a typical CU class, so class period in person, there's 2 to 4 learning objectives. And ultimately, now I haven't done this for every class, but ultimately I would like there to be one screencast for every learning objective for a class. So that's kind of the goal. An online course like Coursera, I would probably aim for 10 to 20 learning objectives per what they call weeks. And a typical Coursera course is maybe 4 to 6 weeks. The longer, the more weeks you have, maybe the fewer learning objectives per week, but that's kind of what I aim for. And creating content in this way, relating it to learning objectives, makes it far easier for students to find topics at a later point. For example, let's say you're a learner studying for the final exam, or you're a student and you're studying for the final exam. You want to learn more about, or you want to review conditional probability. It's far easier to find the screencasts entitled Conditional Probability than it is to look through all the lectures and you find it in something called Lecture 7. So entitling your screencasts with the name of the learning objective really makes it easy on the learners or students. All right. I also like to segment my individual screencasts by placing forced reflective pauses or in-video questions. And I kind of already talked about that, but if you can break up your screencast and transition it from passive viewing to active involvement, then I think that really helps. It makes them pay attention, especially if you have in-video questions. It forces them to reflect on what they're learning. And if you link those in-video questions and play pause it to their grade, then you can really improve their the amount that they care about those screencasts. All right, I think we're kind of running a little low on time, and I wanted to just show a couple examples. So here's if you're new to screencasting, it's going to take you some time to make screencasts that you're happy with. So I look back at one of my earliest screencasts, and this is what it was. First of all, you notice it's 28 minutes and 50 seconds. It's huge. And my voice in here is very, you guys have seen Napoleon Dynamite, probably. I sound like Napoleon Dynamite, not very enthusiastic. There's lots of pauses. I'm actually not going to show this, but lots of pauses where I didn't edit out the pauses. There's lots of ums and K, I say K, things like that I try to edit out.
In this screencast,
see, I just said I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about an edited version versus an unedited version. Now, this is the most recent screencast that I've ever made. So this was like last fall. so this is the edited version. And let me just play kind of the first 30 seconds or so. This is the edited.
In this screencast, I'm going to be talking about the test statistic approach to hypothesis testing. Recall from a previous screencast, there are three main techniques for performing hypothesis tests, either on the mean, the variance, comparison of means, comparison of variances, and so on. We can use confidence intervals, and I showed you this in a previous screencast.
All right, so that's my edited version, and it's, you know, I feel like it's pretty captivating. It looks professionally done. It looks like I know what I'm doing. But if you look at the unedited version, this is the unedited version before doing any editing. It's terrible. And you'll see that when I record, I redo things, I pause, I start over, I stumble, but don't worry about that, because in Camtasia, you can cut out a lot of things and splice everything back together. Some of you might be a lot better at speaking than I am doing when you record, and you might not have to do as much editing. But if you're like me, sometimes I stumble, I need to redo things, but this is what the unedited raw version looks like.
The second main way, in this screencast, I'm going to be talking about the test statistic approach to hypothesis testing. Recall from a previous screencast that there are three main techniques for performing hypothesis tests.
Okay, so yeah, so you heard that I stumbled and started over, but all of that you can take out during the post-processing editing. All right, I just have two slides left. The main takeaways from this. Each screencast should be focused on a single course learning objective, a small bite of course material. So you want to kind of link it to your learning objectives. It's just a small little chunk they can easily digest. You want to build off previously learned material if appropriate. You want to be energetic, enthusiastic, and attention grabbing. You want to have minimal downtime, and that is, you don't want there to be many pauses in your recording, because that just lengthens the time. And you want them to be about 4 to 9 minutes in length. At least that's, I've had good experience with that time frame. If you do have more lengthy material, I separate my screencasts into parts 1, 2, and possibly even 3 parts, but you want to separate them into their own freestanding screencasts. Consider including in-video questions every 2 to 3 minutes to retain learner focus and attention. And again, I would recommend here at CU, if you're doing this, to use Play Pause It. And we all have our own style. Certainly, the style that I have kind of converged upon works really well for me. It might not work for you. I'd encourage all of you to develop your own style when creating these screencasts. And in conclusion, screencasts really do not require magic at all, just planning, hard work, proper workflow that works best for you, and learning from failure. But the effort is well worth it. Screencasts stand the test of time and can be viewed over and over by thousands of learners and students. So I think we might have a couple of minutes if anybody has any questions or comments. I apologize for taking a lot longer than I had expected.
That was great. That was great, Charlie. And no apologies. It was really specific. Thank you. I see a hand. So Chris, go ahead.
Hey, Charlie, thank you very much. I learned a lot. And I wanted to ask you, since we have a short time here, do you purposely not show yourself in your screencasts?
So I never show myself in screencasts, and I don't know. I've never done that. There was a slide that I cut out, but I wanted to show you another example of somebody else who had done that. They put up in the corner, they put their head. I think it's very effective.
Yeah,
but if you do that, then the editing becomes more complicated, doesn't it?
I think it probably does. I don't know the technical aspects. If you can link in real time. Yeah, I don't know how you would do that. A camera recording with the Camtasia screen capture. Yeah, I don't know how that would be done.
Well, I just want to say, as another strong believer of Camtasia, I use it all the time myself. They do make it really easy to have your webcam record at the same time as you're doing all your other things that you showed. I just wanted to know if there was if you had any research or knowledge about whether or not that seeing the person was maybe distracting. It gets, goes in line with you keeping it simple, or if there was another reason. But I appreciate you telling me what you thought.
I would say, I really wanted to show that example of it was from someone from Bozeman, Montana State. I think it actually enhanced the learning because you felt like there was somebody right there. Yeah, I really liked it. So, yeah.
I'll make a screencast for you showing you how to do it with Camtasia.
Yeah, that'd be great. Can you actually take a screen recording of when you're in Camtasia?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, it complicates post-production. Alana, you have your hand up there. Go ahead.
Thanks. This was really great. So thanks so much for presenting this. I wondered, what are the best practices that you use around accessibility, especially if this is something that you're requiring for students in your class to make sure it's accessible?
Yeah, that's a great question. Coursera automatically, well, I don't know if it's a bot or somebody does it, but they have captioning underneath it. Play, pause it. So if you have somebody with accessibility requirements in your class, somebody will contact you. Like I've been contacted, and the Office of Disabilities, somebody transcribed all of my required play, pause it modules, which was probably a lot of work. Yeah, but yeah, that's a consideration.
Chris, is your hand still up, or are you? So we are pretty much at time, and I want to thank you, Charlie. Thank you so much. That was really useful and precise and wonderfully precise. So thank you for that. I want to let everyone go home because we're at time, but I kind of wonder about the end of college. And I wonder, you started with this really kind of ambitious, sweeping, how does technology change college? How does it change expectations? And I wonder if you just had a thought at the end, returning to that, like your experience of Coursera, I think has been massively successful. And yet, I mean, what's your reflection about the shape of learning?
So before COVID, I was kind of a believer that eventually everything's going to be online, and maybe maybe your junior and senior years, you would come to college in person. But after COVID, I had terrible experiences with teaching at CU during COVID, as I think a lot of you may have, where everybody was forced online, and that really made me a firm believer, or disbeliever, I guess, in online for college, for CU type, college undergrads. For professional learners who have been out in the field, they're different. Coursera is very successful because when you're out working, you need to learn something for your career, for your job. And so they're very motivated to learn something. And online learning, I think, works very well for those types of learners. But when you're an undergrad student and you're don't know what you're doing yet with your life, I don't think online works as well.
I think that's a nice summation and a great place to end. I mean, the pandemic gave us all a blast of online, and it told us how it works, and it does work, but it's not the same kind of communal experience that a 17 to 20-year-old is needed.
Yeah.
Adam, do you want to close us out with a final thought?
I was just curious, as a follow-up to that, whether or not you have the opinion that generationally that will change over time as well. And we seem to adapt to things as time passes and get used to them and even start appreciating them more. And William, you may have described freshmen being that way now, but give a few more years and it could be the opposite, perhaps.
Yeah, I think only time will tell. I thought that things would have gone much more smoothly during COVID because of for me, because I had the experience teaching stuff on Coursera, but I had, I did everything on Zoom. Of course, every student is there with their on Zoom, but blacked out. And then you say, you ask a question and nobody's there. They're there, but they're not there. They're logged in, but so I don't know. I think maybe as things change in the future, I think accountability is really the thing that we have to link learning to, motivation and accountability.
And even for the Zooms, just like any classroom, you can set your expectations at the very beginning and say, could you please all show your faces for this class-wide participation? And that includes everyone showing their faces, et cetera. I think you can set the expectations at the beginning of each lesson or each class that you're teaching.
Yeah, and I didn't do a good job of doing that. I thought for privacy concerns, people wouldn't want to show their faces, but it's the same as coming to class. Yeah.
All right, folks. Thank you all for joining us. It's been a great afternoon. Charlie, thank you. That was really carefully done. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Well, thank you.
Onwards to the end of the semester.
Thank you.